How have you been?
Busy, good, same, just it's never a dull moment over here with me, which is awesome and the way I like it.
Staying on the path. Excellent.
Staying on the path, man. Restarted 75 hard again, so I'm on day 5 or 6 of that, which is like gallon of water a day, working out twice a day, lots of other things. First, it kind of is hard, but then I hit my groove, and like we talked about, it's those marking off all those to-dos that are done every day that just gives me that consistent hit of, what is that, dopamine or oxytocin? It's like, oh, worked out, done, read my 10 pages, done, drank my gallon of water, done. So I'm giving myself all those feel-good chemicals, as well as, how it makes you feel when you do all the right things for your body too.
Exactly. Combination of doing the activity and then all the accomplishment that's attached to them makes us feel really good about ourselves. We start to develop those neural pathways and strengthen them. And before you know it, the brain doesn't know any other way, and it doesn't want any other way because it's getting all that reward.
Yeah. So let's start there because that's where we left off last time. And so I just want to pick that up there because I find that so fascinating. I had brought up that Dr. Andrew Huberman had David Goggins on the show. And Dr. Huberman asked him, like, hey, so you talk about doing all this really hard stuff. You get up at 3 a.m. You're jogging through the streets. You're looking in people's houses. In your mind, you're stealing their souls. You're like super hard. He's like, do you love that shit? That's what drives you, right? Like you get this mindset where you're like dominating. And David looked at me and said, no, dude, I hate that. I hate getting up at 3 a.m. I hate doing all these things. This is what I trick myself into doing to be better where I'm at. And Huberman said, that's fantastic because there is scientific proof that the more you do something you actually hate and don't want to do, the bigger the hits that you get from doing that.
Yeah. So especially the initial parts of doing things that are uncomfortable, the brain doesn't want to do them initially because it's the unknown.
Mm.
The brain is geared and wired to want to keep us in familiarity and predictability because, again,
Comfortability.
its number one job is to keep us safe and alive so that we can have babies and continue with the species. And
Mm.
so these ideas of change that are foreign to the brain because they haven't experienced them yet are dangerous to the brain. They don't understand that, are we going to be putting ourselves in a position where our safety might be jeopardized. Our survival might be jeopardized. And so that's why the brain has to work so hard at initial stages of change, is because it's the unknown. And there's also no reward yet attached to those things, right? We haven't
Mm.
experienced them yet. Um, and the brain, again, finds reward and comfort in just keeping things the way they are because it's satisfying its number one job of, keeping us safe and alive.
Yeah. So then when we challenge ourselves and do something that's uncomfortable or unfamiliar, we're really overcoming that need to stay safe and predictable and comfortable. So that's why we derive more pleasure out of doing that sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, as you're doing the new thing, the brain begins to experience it and recognizes that, you're not dying because of it. And
Mm.
so then it begins to loosen its grip on its desire not to change. And so it's willing to come along. And um, the more rewarding those new experiences are in terms of the chemicals that flow through our bodies that relate to the new experience, um, the more uh, the stronger and more rapid the neural connections become. And so while um, you know the individuals may hate it at the beginning,
Mhm.
over time, just that sense of getting up earlier, accomplishing more, the individual feel-good chemicals that we get from the actual activities of running or whatever it is we're doing that early, all of that combined begins to, strengthen those neural pathways and give us that sense that, yeah, this is something we want to continue to pursue. because it makes us better.
It makes us very, yeah, it's funny. I see this. I mean, it's like the epitome of what we're talking about with CrossFit and the clients who choose to do CrossFit. It's like, a lot of them don't want to start because they just look in there and they're like, ooh, well, that's not for me. That's, whatever they say about it. But then the ones that actually show up, that first time it's hard, but you can see they feel good afterwards because they know they just did something hard, something they haven't done before. They feel good. And then it goes one or two paths. They keep showing up because they're like, oh, that felt good and I want to challenge myself. Or you have the other people who are like, that made me feel too uncomfortable. I'm going to go back to what's safe and comfortable. I'm going to go to yoga or something like that. So I get to see it kind of firsthand, the two types of people, and those that are willing to push and keep being uncomfortable and create those new neural pathways. And then the ones who try it and they're like, not for me, or they even just look in and say, not for me, because it's too uncomfortable for them to even confront.
Yeah. Or they, think of like these changes or new habits as like little sapling trees, okay? And the first time we go into CrossFit, we go to a corner of our yard or the forest and we plant this little sapling, right? And you know, planting the sapling or showing up the first time for something new isn't going to make a habit. The brain requires repetition and reinforcement of reward over periods of time, lots of repetitions. It's estimated that it can take anywhere up to 10,000 repetitions in various
Ooh,
forms for something to actually form into a autonomic habit and a lifestyle.
that's a lot of repetitions. Oh my gosh. If you
Yeah,
CrossFit it 3 times a week, I mean, look how many years that's going to take to really catch. Although you could do push or pull ups or yeah, I get it. Yeah. Wow. That's a lot though.
well, yeah, but it's also just, visualizing going to CrossFit or just
Mm.
reenacting the experience in any way. The brain doesn't know the difference so much between, and it likes to learn in different ways. It likes to experience things that help reinforce itself. So, visualizing things is often as good as actually doing them because it's two different forms of experiencing the same experience, and your brain thinks it's the same thing. So if you're getting uh, good reinforcement, good reward, flows of neurochemicals from visualizing, going to CrossFit and how you're going to feel afterwards, that's as good as a rep. Okay. So all these reps are like taking a can of water and fertilizer over to this little new sapling and putting more water and fertilizer on it. And so that's kind of the
Mm.
way, and some imagery that we can use to think of developing these new habits is the first time we do something, it's a little sapling, and it's not going to grow on its own. We have to nurture it, fertilize it, and water it. And so the people that back out of the habit, that little sapling never gets a chance to put its roots in the ground and become anything. It just kind of keels over and dies, and they back out and stay in what's they believe is comfortable for them. So the people
Mm.
that can power through and
Yeah.
continually focus on what this habit is eventually going to bring to them, what this what this this addition to their identity is going to bring to them, those are the ones that will begin to shift and reshape their identity in this new way that's important to them. But they have to stay in the reward, whether it's visualizing or whatever it's going to take to keep them engaged in this process to have it begin to stick into habit.
That's actually fascinating because it's funny. There was a stigma that, oh, of course I know you're a CrossFitter. Why do I know? Because you always talk about it. But it's funny because I look at the little things that you do. There's like apps and everybody will put in their workout and then other people in the gym will like high five them or thumbs up it. And so you're constantly sort of getting that validation. Oh, what was the workout today? And you talk about it, or oh my God, I got my first pull up. And so, CrossFitters are known for kind of being culty because everybody's kind of talking about it. But as you and I are discussing, I'm like, no wonder everybody likes it so much because we are talking about it, which is creating that visualization. We're affirming what we did. It's not just the 1 hour in the gym, it's all this stuff outside the gym
It's
that
the
is in addition to it that is making you a better CrossFitter. And you leapfrog from just working out 3 times a week to exponentially better when you're doing all those outside the gym things too.
Yeah, and you're talking about it right now, and you have emotion attached to it. And
Yeah.
emotion is very much like fertilizer. It's the miracle grow of habit development. So when you attach a positive emotion to an action and a thought, they all combine together, and that emotional component is like miracle grow. So you sitting there right now talking about your experience, I can hear how excited you are. You are actually repping the whole experience right now and further adding fertilizer onto that neural pathway that you've already got a big strong root representing your exercise programs. And so just you, by virtue of you sitting there talking about it and have an emotional experience related to it, you're putting more fertilizer on it.
Yeah, it's funny. I liken it to, I know like Tom Brady and a lot of these people, they're doing the reps in their head. They're visualizing, they're going through the motions. They're beyond what the, field play is. There's so much mental stuff that they're doing to, how's that going to look? How are you going to feel? How's the ball going to go in the hole, or who, the person catches it in the end zone? Like there's a lot of outside of the actual game that athletes are doing where they're mentally preparing for those moments.
Yeah, that's all because it counts as a rep. Your
Yeah.
brain, again, it's two different forms of learning. One is, doing it, there's doing it on a practice field, there's doing it in a game, there's doing it in your head. Maybe you're talking to someone about it.
Yeah.
Those all count as reps that all contribute to the learning process for the brain. So it just becomes more and more a part of who you are, a stronger, deeper, more connected neural pathway.
Yeah. And I'm sure it is true on the exact flip side is you can't spend all your time just thinking about, talking about it, and visualizing it. There has to be the action of doing it as well. You have to have like both. You can't just visualize being the best CrossFitter in the world and never actually going in the gym and putting in a rep. You actually have to do the physical part of that in conjunction with the outside the part with it.
Yeah, because there's the whole motor movement aspect, right? And we have networks in our brain responsible for the movement of our, extremities and so on, and they all have to be that neural pathway has to bring those into the fold because at the end of the day, when you're CrossFitting, your arms and hands and your legs and everything have to be involved in the process. But again, it's just different forms of learning that help reinforce each other. But you're right, that actual physical component is critical because it's integral in the whole experience.
Yeah. And I can see this relating to addiction. You can't just enter rehab and then walk out the next day and say, I'm good. You've got to literally get in there, do the work, sort of rewire all that old circuitry that you used to have that would lead you to go get a drink or take a drug or that sort of thing, and do that over and over and over again to create the new neural pathways where the first thing that you do when you get home isn't take a drink. Now you've rewired it to, no, I'm going to make dinner, then I'm going to set up for my day tomorrow, I'm going to go take a walk. Like you literally have to physically and mentally put in the reps to change bad habits, which is what overcoming addiction is all about.
Yeah, I mean, just think about all the time that, I can speak for myself as an addict, recovering addict, that, I had a negative, I was uncomfortable in some way. I was hungry, I was tired, I was angry, I had an uncomfortable thought, an emotion. I mean, you name it. I could find almost any reason to use or drink whenever I was uncomfortable. And so you do that enough times, and your brain becomes awful darn good at that pattern, right? It's reinforced it God knows how many times. And so now, you've gone into rehab and you recognize that, I've tried every which way possible, and this addictive lifestyle doesn't work for me. I'm at the end of the road. My sponge is full, and there's just no more place to put any more substances. And so I have to change, but we have to weaken and break the strength of those patterns that you've been repping for all these many years. And so that requires abstinence because, if we stop repping I'm uncomfortable, I drink and use, I'm uncomfortable, I drink and use. If we start that process in rehab, then that tree, which is like, imagine it to be a big old strong oak tree that you've developed over those many years with those gnarly roots that are now starting to uplift your patio. They're starting to cause consequences. That's what my metaphor for it.
It's a
And
great
now
one.
we're going to stop watering and fertilizing that tree. And so therefore those roots, those gnarly roots are now going to begin to weaken because it's got no sustenance. But it's going to take some time. I mean, that tree has deep roots and it's been planted there for a long time. And we've been activating that baby for a long time. So the first step is to stop watering and fertilizing it. And then we're going to go over here and plant this little sapling full of a whole new rebuilding of our lives with all new thoughts, all new emotions, all new actions, which are these things that you're talking about, making a quality dinner, going for a walk, yada, yada. But then there's got to be the thoughts and feelings that go along with it. In other words, you start getting the craving to drink and use because you suddenly find yourself uncomfortable. You have to immediately pause that because if you engage with it and head down that path, you are watering and fertilizing the old big oak tree. And you have to immediately catch yourself, pause, and then start practicing a new set of thoughts, emotions that will represent this new version of yourself that you have now imagined for yourself. And so, this little sapling is weak, but it's got to start somewhere. And, that's why addiction takes time, abstinence plus time to develop new thoughts, emotions, and actions related to this new version of yourself. And as long as you stay in it, stay super structured, stay super disciplined, and just do as you're suggested, you will gradually water and fertilize that new sapling, and little by little, week by week, it gets a little bigger and bigger and bigger. Eventually, your brain is getting enough reward from all of that way of being that it will begin to forget about that your old way of being as that bigger tree is now weakening and going dormant, and those root systems are beginning to fail and break apart. But it just, I mean, the drill. It just takes time, repetition, discipline, commitment, and motivation to stay in it long enough until it begins to come out of your conscious mind. You don't have to work so hard at it. The reward is there, and it begins through the process of repetition. It becomes a habit. It begins to transfer from your conscious frontal cortex into the basal ganglia, which is more of the autonomic part of the brain where all the habits lived, all the things like brushing your teeth, riding a bike, things you don't have to even think about anymore. These new lifestyles will begin to become automatic, like your CrossFitting. I'm sure that you don't even think about it anymore. You just go, it's part of who you are. But,
Yep.
at the start, it was a little sapling, and then you had to stay with it long enough to develop these patterns and fertilize it with reward so that it just all, the loop got closed and it all just became, a part of who you are.
Oh yeah. I mean, in the beginning, I would, after I got acclimated to it, I would cherry pick like, oh, it's a bunch of running today. I'm not going to go today. Oh, today's a lifting day. Yes, I'm going to go. I would go towards what I liked and was good at, and I would avoid those things that I hated and I was bad at. And now I don't even look at the workout. I just show up because I don't want my brain to get involved and have an opinion about it. And I've also learned through all those reps that it's those weaknesses that I should be working. I mean, it's great to like double down on your strengths, but it's also there's a lot of pleasure in developing those weaknesses into strengths. And so it's cool when you can get to that place where you take your brain out of it and you just do it, and then you get the reward either way.
Yeah. So those weaknesses, again, the reason we don't want to stay with them is because we're not deriving enough reward out of them yet.
Yeah.
And so that's where the conscious part of the brain has to intervene and say, okay, I'm not adept at these, but I'd like to be. And if I stay with it and become adept at them, I will feel accomplished. I will get I will get these list of benefits out of becoming adept at something that I'm not skillful in right now. And so that's where we really have to spend time. We collectively, and anything we want to do that's new, have to really spend time in this vision of what this new skill is going to do for us, and really allow the mind to marinate in this compilation of reward that we've identified around this new thing. And then, you know, we have to, but the more times you can do it and you identify a weakness and you build it into a strength, then the brain gets a hell of a lot of reward. You know, all those chemicals that we've discussed around this idea that of conquering, of becoming strong at something you're weak at. It gets to be a point where you know that that's resilience, where you know that there's nothing that you can't overcome. And talk about a superpower. Oh my God. I mean, you know, knowing that you can do anything is pretty cool.
How detrimental is it, switching back to, addiction and overcoming drugs and alcohol, to have a slip up? So like say you've come out of rehab, you're sober, you've got all these great new habits. It's uncomfortable though, because you've hit the real world, where you have your newfound sobriety, but you're back in the old situations. You've been watering the sapling, but it's still just a baby plant. We still got a lot of time to go, and the big oak is still a big oak. How detrimental is it to have a slip where you suddenly are now watering that big old oak again, and you not watering this? Is it like the end of the world, or it's like, okay, it was one watering of the oak. If you get back to the watering of the sapling, I'm not going to say no harm, no foul, because it's, obviously maybe you got some pleasure out of the oak and now your mind's swirling in that. But how does that work out?
Well, you're speaking to someone who relapsed. So, you know, it can be one of two things. I'm sure you know many stories of some of us that had really high usage rates. I mean, at the end, I was taking 50 pain pills and drinking 2 bottles of vodka a day.
Oof.
And you know what it's like when your mind still remembers what your usage pattern was. And so I don't know about you, but one of the things that keeps me super straight right now is I know that if I were to ever go back and use, not that it even enters my mind anymore, that I would have one pain pill and one drink, and I wouldn't know when to stop, and I
Mm-hmm.
would kill myself. And so that's what you hear from a lot of people that, well, or hear stories about of people that have been sober for years and suddenly have some kind of a slip up triggered some way, and they've killed themselves in a weekend because, you know, addiction is what it is, and your brain wants to go back to that usage level. You no longer have, because it just can't get enough dopamine from this old pattern, and you don't have tolerance built up anymore, and you OD. So
Yeah,
if you
because
slip,
mentally you're picking up where you left off, but
yeah,
physically you're not there anymore. So it is super dangerous. We see that a lot.
yeah, there's no going back to go for free or anything like that. Like you'd think that after 10 years you might get, you know, a go back to go card free or something, you know, where your brain, but it's not like that. And you pick up right where you left off. Um, and so, assuming you don't kill yourself by slipping up,
Mhm.
what it can do is reinforce how horrible addiction was. You know, you wake up the next day and you just feel like god awful, not just the physical consequences of slipping up, but also the guilt and the shame
Mm.
and all of that. And so it can be used as a reinforcing experience that gets you right back in the game. Um, but So it can be either. It just depends. You know, but you've heard stories, I know, that, you go on a binge and who knows where that ends.
Yeah.
Some people come back from it, some don't. So I don't know if I'd highly recommend it.
No,
But
I definitely wouldn't. You don't want to, I always tell people it's like playing Russian roulette. You could be okay or you could die. Like, who wants to take that chance?
yeah, exactly. Um, so hopefully, you experienced enough reward out of however long you were in sobriety, if you did slip up, that you recognize that this is in fact the life for you. You found your tribe, with your community that you're trying to recover with, and you feel like you belong there. And so hopefully there's been enough attachment that that sapling's gotten enough water and fertilizer that it draws you back, and you can continue on your path. Because um, there's sobriety dates,
Mhm.
but frankly, I feel like sometimes there's too much attention paid to that in the rooms.
Yep.
There's too much ego attached to it. And ego is the thing we're trying to get away from. And so really it's, what have you got going on today? How good is your recovery? Because there's sober and then there's recovery. And recovery is the endless pursuit of being the best version of yourself. So uh, what's your life like today? That's really what matters.
Yeah.
Because
And quality of life. Yeah.
that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Because frankly, there's no joy in giving up drinking and drugs just to give it up. That means that you're giving up something, you're losing something, right? What's the joy in that? The joy is in recovery, is in getting something better than what you're leaving behind. So if you're not pursuing that better version of yourself and everything that can come along with it, that's really where that you see the people successful in recovery. That's what they're glowing about, is the fact that they figured out they're on this path. They're in love with the process of trying to get better and getting as far away from that old lifestyle as they can get. If they just stand still, they're too close to that old life. They're trying to move further and further away from it. Um, by identifying this new identity of themselves. And identities are not fixed. And that's another thing about neuroscience and the understanding of how mental experiences are created. Identity is just like a thought or an emotion. It's constructed in real time. So our identity of ourselves is what it is today, how we envision it. But it could change. It could be something different tomorrow. And so it's a constantly workable, malleable construction of underlying components like values, beliefs, psychological needs, strengths, all of these things. So as you develop, let's say you identify a weakness, you develop it into a strength, it becomes part of your identity. Bingo, your identity has now evolved. And so it's that whole endless pursuit of getting on the path to this better version of yourself, this identity that will constantly be evolving and changing, but it's always in the pursuit of something better, better for yourself and better for those around you, the people in your lives.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because that exactly talks about like the difference between like say a dry drunk who yeah, they gave up the alcohol, but they didn't change any of their habits. So they're absolutely miserable to the point where you're like, why even bother quitting drinking? Like if you're going to be that miserable, because you literally have to take action and create new habits that make you feel good, that are productive, hopefully of service to others, because addiction can be very like, me. So, I know a lot of people in recovery get so much out of helping others or being of service to others, which helps create those neural pathways. But if you just give up the substance and expect to suddenly be better, you've just gave up the substance. And like you said, that just leaves them wanting and miserable because they didn't replace it with anything good or bad. They just took it away.
Yeah. And so they're still very close, even though they could have been sober for 30 years. They're still very close to that identity of who they were when they were in addiction. They haven't moved. They stood still. And
Yeah.
so that is, to me, dangerously close. They haven't evolved their identity. They're not experiencing any joy and reward from anything new and different in their lives. They haven't found new sources of joy and reward that are going to replace um, the dopamine and serotonin, the dopamine from the chemicals. But this path to recovery actually emits more well-being chemicals, oxytocin, serotonin. Um, Addiction's primarily a dopamine releaser, these spikes of pleasure, and we start to pursue in recovery other more meaningful, productive pursuits that deliver some other neurochemicals that actually aren't really short-lived, like the dopamine is in addiction. They're more constantly with us. They well up from within us. They kind of just lighten us. They put us on this, you hear people talk about a pink cloud. Well, that's what this is. It's the underlying neurochemicals that are making us feel good all day, every day, because we're on this path constantly pursuing thoughts, feelings, and emotions that are more pleasurable, that make us better, that are more harmonious to those around us. And so there's just this never, we're often running in that life. If you're not in that life and on that path and in the process of pursuing a better version of yourself, you are stuck standing still, staying too close to the addictive life, and that's why you're not happy. There's nothing joyful that you've replaced your old life with.
Do you think that it's kind of like let's say, and we'll just stick with the same example for like CrossFit, okay, that helped me overcome addiction, makes me feel good about it. Can you keep coming back and tapping that well and keep getting that feeling over and over and over again, let's say for the next 80 years, or it reaches a point where it's like you're just going through the motions and it doesn't give you that same thing anymore and you should like look outside to try something new and different because that well is tapped? Or can you forever stay with something that makes you feel good?
If it makes you feel good. And so that's where the constant evaluation of oneself comes in.
Mm,
Are you getting reward from it or not? Um, a lot of it just depends on you.
mm,
A lot of times, as the muscles, this is a good analogy. Um, in order for the muscles to continue developing, you have to continually test them and tease them. And weightlifters have to constantly change their routines to trick their muscles to get them to grow more and better in different ways. If you stayed with the exact same number of reps, the exact same amount of weight, your muscles would stop responding. And
yeah.
so, yeah, you could find that, the exact same routines without any change um, stop delivering reward to you and you become stagnant. And that's where I have to identify that in yourself is that, I'm becoming stagnant. I'm not in this evolving pursuit of betterment. I'm feeling stagnant. And so that, is a sense or a feeling about oneself that um, hopefully, during this process, we become engaged with the actual process of being better. It's not arriving anywhere. It's being in this process of wanting to change and evolve and try new things and become more rounded and develop new skills and this and that. So really that's what I'm wary to say the word addicted to, but um, you know,
But
some of us have addictive personalities. That's how we became addicts in the first place. And there's wiring around that and predispositions around that. So really you're just redirecting those energies to this addiction to this constant pursuit of being better version of yourself.
Yeah, I'm definitely one of those people. Like after I do the same thing 3 times, I'm like, I'm good. Like I can't, a routine, even the types of food I eat, the times of food I eat, like I get accustomed to it really quickly and then it no longer delivers that same thing. And I have to continuously create new ways to continually get that feel good hormone because if it becomes predictable for me, I can't stand it. So I like to keep everything but yet at the same time, I know a lot of people that have to have that routine. That routine is what drives them. And if they go outside the routine, that's what makes them not feel good. So is there like two different types of people that respond in those two different ways?
Yeah, because reality is our own subjective experience of it. Okay, so that's another thing about neuroscience is that you and I are having this conversation right now, and you think it's going one way, and are feeling a certain thing about it, and I am thinking something different and feeling something different about it. We both look at this thinking or maybe assuming that we're both experiencing the exact same version of it, but that's not the case because we think, feel, and act in ways that represent our past experiences. So all of the experiences we've ever had in our lives are now logged in our brains as neural pathways, as concepts, as representations of all the things that we've experienced in our lives. And we draw upon those in the current moment to construct our reality as we're living in it. And so, that's just so everybody gets their choice as to what makes them tick.
Yeah.
And so if certain patterns of behavior deliver reward on an ongoing basis for the individual, and that's what puts them in their right place, great. If it requires something different for somebody else, great. We all get to choose that. The big thing is, umbrella wise, are we pursuing better versions of ourselves, whatever that means to us? And are we being, kind to ourselves and those around us and helping to move the world forward in some positive way? You know, as far as I'm concerned, as long as it falls under that umbrella, you know, we're all good, right? We should all be able to do our own thing.
Yeah, well, and I think it's having that discipline to, if it doesn't feel right, to changing it. Like we're not tied into anything for our whole lives. Like this no longer feels good. Well, that's okay. Find something that does feel good. It doesn't mean it has to be for forever. Like being willing to be adventurous, and I guess that's where like self-awareness and checking in really comes from because maybe what happens with people is that they do something like this because they've always done it and they used to get a lot out of it, but now they're not getting a lot out of it, but they don't know it's because it's just no longer delivering. And then they start imagining all these other things are creating this thing inside of them when in reality, they just need to find something that gives them that same feeling again, switch it up, be adventurous, try something new instead of keep trying that same thing that's no longer working anymore.
Yeah, and we addicts actually have a real advantage because we've undergone some of the most tremendous change that a person can undergo. And so we already have evidence that change works. We already have evidence that change can be beneficial. We have this template now ingrained in our minds as neural pathways, and so we should know that change can make us feel better. And so yeah, it's just this, and I really think that this, this idea of people being on this path and moving forward, finding better versions of themselves, it really just becomes the act of doing it. And we're almost these neurochemical junkies that are now not really in search of, I mean, we still get dopamine, don't get me wrong.
Mhm.
It feels different because we're getting these other chemicals as well. And we're also not getting these like euphoric spikes in dopamine. We're getting more, natural life oriented spikes in dopamine because dopamine's greatly tied to motivation. We wouldn't continue to do things if we weren't getting dopamine, but we're just getting all these other really wellness chemicals that are adding to that. and so I just, again, it's this process. There's never a finish line. It's just always, and that's why it's so important, like for people to learn as they get older, right? To ward off cognitive decline is just this act of always learning something new, always being engaged in the process of new, so that we're exercising the mind, the amount of accomplishment that you feel from that, which is reward in form of neurochemicals. It's just increasingly important as we get older.
Yeah, and I could see that being a problem with, people when they retire, now we just, maybe go play some pinochle, maybe just, go visit the grandkids. But if we're not continually learning or challenging ourselves, it's almost like that oak tree. Those neural pathways start drying up, right? Like we start losing, like you said, that cognitive ability because now we're not doing or challenging or learning or doing anything to keep those stimulation going with that.
Yeah, and there's the age factor, right? I mean,
Mhm.
our bodies are beginning to degrade in varying ways as we age. And there are two ages in our lives when we experience more rapid cognitive decline than others. And those ages are 45 and 65.
Okay.
uh, we're always declining, but there's more rapid decline at those two ages. And so, retirement just happens to be around 65. And so if you're already getting these natural declines from physiologically, just because you're getting older, then you have to do, if you want to have a great quality later in life experience, we have to do all kinds of things to continue to optimize our brain, because our brain will respond, um, we can have very fruitful lives as long as we do two things. Well, more than two things, but movement is critical.
Mhm.
Body movement,
Mhm.
always in motion. That's why you find older people that are sedentary really start to decline quickly.
Mhm.
Secondly, the brain. Um, Cognitive motion. So always learning. So constantly challenging the brain to learn new things. It's like the gym membership for the brain, right? You've got to work out your brain. Um, and then, there's always obviously the diet and other things are critical, because, Alzheimer's and dementia being linked to, inflammation, which
Mhm.
is promoted by sugar and processed foods. There are, every night when we sleep, there's fluids from the body that come up into the brain and pull out toxins. And diet is critical to that. The gut biome is critical to that. So just all these things kind of group together to contribute to an aging process that can be more graceful, and longer lived and more enriching than if we, just kind of shut everything down.
I love that. It makes me think of my grandmother who she's 96. She's almost about to be 97 and she chooses to continue to work. And it's not a high pressure job by any means, but she gets out of the house, she goes, she works in a cuz she's from Nevada, so they have little casinos in everything. So she goes to her little casino area in the grocery store and it's pretty low key, not a lot of people, but what she's able to do while she's sitting there waiting for customers is she reads and she reads and she reads and she reads. Like she'll go through 5 books in a week. But I now realizing as you're saying this is probably what's keeping her healthy and alive because she's physically getting out of the house. Her diet's fine. She doesn't eat a lot. She doesn't need a lot. But also, she's continuously reading. She's challenging herself. She has to add up the drawer every night. She has to do all the different things that's keeping her physically, mentally. Of course, she goes to church, spiritually, it's keeping her young, even though her body's getting older. I mean, she's 97. But at the same time, it's kind of what's all coming together to keep her alive.
Yeah. And it's no accident. All those things that we just discussed, she's doing, and there's the evidence. And I
Yeah.
think that you probably will find commonalities with anybody that's living a rich, fuller, longer life. There's those commonalities. There's diet, there's, nutrition, there's movement, there's cognitive challenge, emotional stability, all the things that, we logically know that are important, but this isn't just, this is real stuff. And I know a lot of us spend time in the gym, working our bodies and giving it a lot of respect and attention. But how much are we really focused on the brain and what it needs?
Mm,
We just assume that it's there, going to be there. I mean, we probably take more care of our car engines by getting the oil changed and the filters changed every 6,000 miles than we do. When was the last time we did an oil and tune-up change on our brains? And do we even think about that? Like, what are we cognizant that our brain needs to be cared for? Should be.
yeah. And challenged and keep learning. I mean, there's such infinite knowledge in the world these days that there's no shortage of means of learning a new skill, finding out information. That's why I love these podcasts, because I continually find and hear new information that is fascinating to me that I didn't know before. And it gives me that spark and excitement because I'm like, oh, that totally makes sense. Or I always felt like that, but I didn't know why. And then, I get external validation from someone like you of like, there's actually science behind this, and that is truth, and that is that. So it's something that I love and I certainly enjoy in my life. But I notice for people, around my age and, like you said, a little bit older, they almost reach a point where they're kind of like, this is as good as it gets. Now I'm on the downhill slide for the rest of my life. Don't need to work so hard. I got this hip thing. I got this other thing. I'm settled in my job. And they almost like give up, which for me is kind of crazy because, again, I'm looking at my grandma who's 96 and I'm like, wait, I can't give up at 50. I got another 50 years. Like, you're already kind of giving up on everything. That seems so crazy to me.
Yeah, and then it comes to fruition, right? It
Right.
becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So, um,
And it's that comfortability we talked about. They're comfortable. They've got a good career. Their kids are grown. So there's that. They've created this comfortability where they don't feel like they need to push or create new neural pathways or anything. It's just become very comfortable.
yeah, and okay, if that's the route you want to go, but that's why I feel like, I know that the road to recovery is the right one for me. And again, it's the endless pursuit of being the best version of yourself. So anyone can be on the road to recovery. You don't have to be an addict. It's this idea that, life is from the time that you're born to the time that you pass this endless journey that never ends, never slows down, unless you want it to. But for me, it's not. Of seeing what else is out there, how else I can enrich my life, how might I be able to positively impact others. I don't know. For me, I feel like when I recovered from addiction, my life just started. I feel like at 52, when I recovered, that this is now how life was supposed to have been from the very beginning. And it's like I've got a lot of catching up to do, and a long way that I can go. And so I just feel like I'm, getting started. I feel like, I'm a teenager again, trying to live life the way it should have been lived instead of
But
the past.
isn't that great though? Isn't the overcoming that adversity what makes us appreciate what we have so much now? Had you not gone down the path of addiction to see that darker side, you have been able to completely enjoy the new path that you're on because you have that comparison to how bad it could get. Whereas had you just sort of breezed through life, not super highs, not super lows, but you just kind of cruise through life. Do you feel like maybe you're actually better off because of overcoming an addiction?
Um, yeah, I mean, I've never tried that other way. So, so I don't know, but I can tell you that, um, I freely am open with my addictive past and I'm proud of it. And, I'll tell anybody that wants to listen to it, and I'm not ashamed of it in the slightest. I'm proud of it
Yeah.
because, it was a marked experience in my life that caused me to shift to the better. And I know that other people are suffering, that I might be able to help them by being open about it and what I've learned about how to recover. So I just couldn't be more grateful that it happened in my life, given where it's landed me.
Mhm.
Um, I just, so I guess hopefully that answers your question, but I'm just, um, yeah, totally grateful that it's happened to me.
So let's circle back. We talked about, someone new in recovery. Now it's new, it's unfamiliar, it's uncomfortable. We're talking about like after they get to rehab, how, they have to build the new neural pathways. But what has to happen neurochemically for somebody to be willing to even take that first step, because they've already know as an addict, alcoholic, or what their perception is, this is going to be painful, it's going to be new, it's going to be different, I'm going to be uncomfortable, I'm going to be around people I don't like, I'm not going to have the substance to numb or help me. Like, what has to happen in a person's life to get them to confront and do those things? I mean, I know obviously, the obvious answers are like imposed, like external imposing, the family, the courts, the this or the that. How do they self get to that point to be willing to do that without maybe an external force?
Well, the thing that comes to mind is an understanding that change is possible. I don't think many of us understand what change is. Like, what is it that, um, I mean, I mean, conceptually, you can recognize, okay, I'm in this spot now. I wish I wasn't. I
Mhm.
wish I was in a different spot. And then the change would be getting from here to there. But then how does that translate into how do I get there?
Mhm.
And so that's where this knowledge of neuroscience comes in super handy, where you understand biologically, physiologically, what your current state represents in the brain. And that's what I help people do is take them in the brain, show them the neurons, show them the pathways that they've developed. And I have, different ways of helping them see the light around that. And then
Mm.
also then talking about how the brain changes and taking them through the neurological process of change. So then they get this understanding in their minds. They can get their arms around what it is that they have to do. And then they become, as a result of that knowledge, that information, a light bulb goes on, and they can then become willing and engaged in the process because they understand it.
Mm.
I think that what makes it hard is that people just, they know they're stuck. They'd like to not be stuck. They can loosely imagine what not being stuck looks like, but they have zero idea how to get from point A to point B.
Mhm.
And so it's that
Yep.
unknowingness that is the impediment to change. And so, you know, a lot of us have to wait till the consequences are super high, until there is no choice, like you say, being imposed upon us. Um, or, we just kind of live through the rest of our lives not changing or whatever it may be. Or, you can go to rehab, get help, or work with a coach, or, yada, get some help from somebody that's traveled the path before. Go to AA, if addiction's your issue, and work with a sponsor who has been there and done that. Work with a program that's, been 80, 90 years in place and is tried and true. There's help out there from people that have walked the path that can help guide you and direct you. Um, but it does take motivation and commitment on the front end from the individual, the desire and the sense that they need and want to change.
And the willingness to push through that uncomfortableness and stay consistent with it is big, because we'll have a lot of people come in like, okay, I'm going to do it. And then a few days they're like, maybe I'm not ready. and so, not everybody sticks with it. how do you show people their brain? Do you do like a brain scan and you can see like it firing and saying, hey, here's where it's not firing and this is why we need to do this, or is this how we can do this? How do you show people that?
Yeah, so a combination of articles, pictures, videos,
Mm,
there's all kinds of stuff available that bring the person inside the brain and actually um, illuminate what's going on in there, and explain to them how the brain operates, how it functions, like how their mental life comes to be. Um, People, we don't understand, like, okay, well, what's the brain? What's the mind? How does one lead? How does one emerge from the other?
mhm,
How are thoughts, emotions, and actions even formed in the, like, why do certain things pop up into our heads? Where do they come from? Um, how could I possibly even change those to ones that I prefer better?
mhm,
All of that I take people through. And then, so it's like learning a whole new language, learning the ABCs of, it's like learning anything else. It's like learning a new instrument,
yeah,
learning a new athletic endeavor, learning a new language. You're learning about your brain and how it works and how you can partner with it and direct it in the way that you want to, instead of just taking what it has to offer you based on what you've exposed it to in the past. Because that's really all your brain is, just delivering to you what you've shown it in the past, the experiences that you've had, and it's just regurgitating them and repredicting those in the current moment. So if you're not liking what's happening in the moment, it's because you've had experiences in your past that are contributing to how it's going in the moment. And the more that you continue to relive that, the more you're reinforcing it, and you're just in this hamster wheel. And
yeah,
so to break out of that, you have to understand how the brain will allow you to break out of it. And this isn't like voodoo, hoo-ha type stuff. This is science.
yeah,
Okay. I mean, all the people that have ever recovered are doing these things. Their brains have rewired themselves.
yeah,
It's just that they didn't realize it at the time. They just did what that was pointed out and suggested to them. And as a result of them, their neurons began to shift. I just find, for me, I wanted to know more about what
mm,
was happening during the process. So that's why I went down this rabbit hole that I'm now in, of neuroscience. And I think it does help people, especially the ones that want to understand the why, hows, and wheres. And that knowledge then allows them to put their arms around their um, own situation and help guide and direct it. Those people that want autonomy and want choice and want
mhm,
involvement in themselves, they like to know. And
yeah.
so that's what, neuroscience does, is it helps illuminate these things that they're not aware of.
Yeah. And so tell me if I'm right or wrong on this, or maybe neither. But so there is the harmful act that the person does to themselves or others, but it seems like, from what my understanding is, it's the guilt and shame aspect of it that's almost more detrimental to the person than the actual act itself. Do you find that to be true with neuroscience, that the guilt and shame, because I know like vibrationally guilt and shame are like the very bottom of like that scale, like if we were measuring whatever it is we measure in neuroscience, that the guilt and shame are at the very bottom of it.
Well, I would contend that shame is worse than guilt, because
Okay.
guilt is remorse for
Yeah.
having done a certain thing, an act, a one-time thing. Shame is um, how we feel about ourselves at a deep core level, which means it is poison that infiltrates and affects all parts of our being. It's like they're always type thing.
Yeah.
Um, but these thoughts, feelings, and actions are generally always tied up together. In other words, we don't commit an action of some type without thought and emotion attached to it, right?
Hmm.
That's how the mind works. It's dynamic, it interplays. These different mental states interplay with each other. And so, um, they're all, the action, the thought, and the emotion are all wrapped up together. The ones that have the highest levels of emotion are the ones that are strongest within us. So, and the ones that are attached to our identity, the core roots and fabrics of us, are the strongest. And so, yeah, if you're if you are feeling shame and doing and thinking things that help reinforce that shame, um, those are really thick, uh, deep, and deeply embedded roots that are strong. And so that's why it feels so detrimental, is because it goes to the core of how we identify ourselves and permeates every part of our being. Like it's something that's just, it's this cloud that we just can't get away from. Um, and that's why it generally, leads to depression and other types of symptoms.
Yeah, which it completely describes, especially people deep in addiction. They do dumb things under the influence or to support their habit. They know it's not good or bad. They almost can't stop themselves because they're physically, mentally, emotionally addicted to the substance. And they know they're doing wrong or bad harm, usually to others and a lot of times to self. And so then it throws them into that shame spiral, which is so low. And I think that's probably like why a lot of people in recovery can struggle is because now they're in a sober mind confronting these things that they've done that are extremely harmful to themselves or others. And then that shame attaches while they're sober. And so it's really difficult to sort of for them to learn to confront and handle it, but then do the steps to sort of reverse that. And a lot of people, like we see, it's in a very latter part of our program where they're writing up all their transgressions. You can see the emotions that go with that because they're having to finally take a look while they're sober at the wreckage, and with that comes that shame. And then I think the flip side or the answer to that is this is where you put in love and grace, because that was the old Jew. And yes, you fucked up, but at the same time, now let's give yourself the love, the self-love that you've been lacking and that you need, so that we can like almost come to the exact opposite place on the scale with them.
Yeah, what you've just described is the process of neuroplasticity, of rewiring the brain. So we have these old patterns that we've reinforced over and over again, and they are represented again as neural pathways in the brain's roots on the tree. And so during your program, you are deconstructing those patterns, picking them apart, trying to analyze all the root causes of them. And then what the objective then is to create a new identity. You recognize that these patterns are not who you want to be, not who you are at your core. And so then you draw a stake in the ground that says, okay, going forward, these are the values I want to have. These are the beliefs, the strengths, the goals, the aspirations, etc. And so then you can begin to analyze these old destructive patterns, break them apart, and say, that really wasn't me. It's what I did. It's how I conducted myself, but it's not who I am at the belief, value, core level. And I'm going to start to rebuild myself on that identity that I know who I am. So going forward, all new thoughts, emotions, and actions need to reinforce this new identity. I can no longer engage and keep reinforcing these old patterns because I'm just fertilizing and watering them. And so, so at the end of that process that you're discussing, the idea is that you don't you don't say that, okay, I didn't do these things, I did, but it's not who I am. I'm reconstructing myself now. So I'm going to package that person up, that old identity, and I'm going to put it in a volume of a book, and I'm going to put it up on the shelf that I can look at, but I'm no longer going to live in that book. Those are the old patterns. That's the old me. And I'm moving forward now, writing a new book, new chapter. And so you're really just kind of deconstructing the old patterns, looking at them, making amends, resolving resentments, getting the weight lifted, letting it go, putting the book on the shelf, and then starting forward. And it's that process of releasing
Yeah.
that the old self, where the relief comes from, where the shame can be released, the forgiveness can happen, and we can begin to start anew. Because you really can't start anew, building the new structure on the new foundation of the new identity, until you've released the old. You've got to clean the slate.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because I see like one of the biggest things, yes, we have everybody make amends, but I think the one that really hits a lot of times because people maybe neglect it, I'm not sure, is that forgiveness of self and making amends to yourself for having done that to yourself. Because I think it's easy to put everything outside of ourselves. I did that. I hurt my body. I did this. It's like, okay, well, sometimes, and especially with addiction, you've got to learn how to give back to yourself and acknowledge yourself and reward yourself and give yourself grace for having done those things. Like you said, it's not who you are, it's who you were. And so let's learn how to love ourselves, because many addicts, they don't know how to do that. It's almost like you have to teach them how to make themselves number one, how to care for themselves, how to make themselves feel important, because their self-worth and self-esteem is so low because of all those harmful acts and things that they've done, that's what they identify as. And you've got to teach them that's not who they are, that's who they were, and that's also a different identity.
Yeah. Yeah, I also try to encourage people to look at it's not even who they were, who they are. It's the actions that they took, it's the patterns that they were in.
Yeah.
And again, um, many of these patterns started when they were in childhood, with how they were raised, the experiences that they had. It caused them to feel uncomfortable. They found substances, they became addicted. The substances made them feel better for a while until they didn't. The addiction set in, it caused them to enact a bunch of different actions and behaviors and thoughts and feelings that they're no longer proud of. But these are all patterns that developed in their brain. It's not really who they are, who they want to be at their core. And so, that allows them, I think, and that in the combination of making amends to the people that they've harmed, allow them to kind of put everything in perspective and hopefully move forward. I know that when I went through the process of amends and forgiveness, that just the act of going to those people and taking accountability for how I had harmed them, um, and not looking for anything in return, just fessing up to it. The relief I felt, the weight off my shoulders, the forgiveness I was able to start to feel towards myself, especially when I recognized that, hey, I ended up the way I did. It's not who I was. It's, things that happened to me and things that I did, but it's not who I am at my core. And so that, just allowed me to kind of put things in perspective and feel forgiveness for myself, and
Mhm.
and be able to, I mean, the amount of weight that comes off your shoulder during those processes is unbelievable.
It's
And
true.
and that's really what you're doing, is shedding an old skin, shedding weight off your shoulder, and you just suddenly feel lighter, and it's almost like you feel reborn and ready to try something new. It's this weight that you feel from these repetitive cycles, and just these feelings about yourself that um, are just hard to escape. It's like this weighted blanket that you can't get out from underneath.
Yeah, unless you like weighted blankets like I do. No, I'm kidding. So and I find and I love that. I mean, and that's just like how I act in general in life. Look, like none of us are perfect. I'm not perfect. I make mistakes, but my first go-to is I always will go apologize. Like, shoot, I messed up on that. I'm sorry. It's just who I am, because I don't want to carry that around. Why is that so hard for people to do? And this is outside of like the program and the process and the steps that we go through, but in actual life outside of there, why is it so hard for people to own up and just say, I'm sorry, and quit carrying that weight? Like that need to be right is bigger than the, oh, shoot, I fucked up. I'm sorry. Can we move on from that? Is there some neuroscience behind that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a protective mechanism, right? They're trying to protect themselves and their identity of themselves, and they're, it could well be tied to, how they were raised.
Mm,
Um, you know, they only received love, for example, when they performed or did things the right way. And so then if they admit that they're not doing things the right way or made a mistake, in a sense, they're not getting love from their parents. And you may laugh at that or think that that's crazy, but that's how these patterns all start.
yeah, that's like
Is
the core wounds, right?
Yeah, but again, how we feel today, how we experience, how we act, feel, and emote today is a culmination of all of our previous experiences. And if these patterns start early on in our lives, when our brains are not even developed, and they're imprinting themselves right away on our brains, and then we begin to react accordingly when we experience threats
Mm,
as we're growing up or the perceived threats, these things start to reinforce themselves.
yeah.
And, we just simply develop them and carry them with us into adulthood. And whenever you see these behaviors out of people that you're wondering why, that's really why. That's where they developed early on in childhood, and they've just carried them with in adulthood, and they're self-protective mechanisms, you know.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because you can see people who've gone through recovery and they've handled those traumas, the big T's, the little T's, whatever. They've had to like look and confront those issues of what put them on their path for addiction. However, a lot of times, I'm not going to say they're better off than people that haven't, but it has forced them to sort of look at those things, acknowledge them, be aware of them, and then change those behaviors. Whereas people who've not gone through addiction and they've functioned normally in life, they still have these traumas. They just got them down there deep, and they may not be as aware of them activating or reactivating or creating the patterns in their life that, addiction's like right out there. You can see it. It's very visible to everybody, including yourself. But I think your average person has those traumas as well, but they've never been sort of forced or moved to confront them and deal with them.
Exactly right. They've just chosen not to cope with addictive substances to deal with their traumas. They deal with them in different ways, or maybe they didn't have addiction in their genes or whatever it is. But
Yeah.
yeah, so what's the impetus for people to change and confront them and deal with them and process them? That's why, again, one of the reasons I'm grateful for my experience in addiction is it allowed
Mm,
me to have to move through these things. Um, and we got training, how to be like an adult uh, through our recovery. Forced training, but we got training, and
yeah.
that's the thing that frustrates me. As a child, we need this training, and the training that we get is from our parents. And the question becomes, is everybody suitable to be a parent? And what training did they get to be a parent? And invariably, it's the training they got was the training that they got from their parents.
Yeah.
So parenting is modeled from one generation to the next based on what we remember from how we were parented.
Yeah.
And so, God help me, why is it that we are not teaching parenting, child psychology, and other important subjects like that in high school versus calculus and
Right.
trigonometry that we're never going to use?
Right.
It just bewilders me why the most important thing for the sake of our human race, why wouldn't we educate around these most important subjects of carrying on the species, having and raising children? Like there is zero training around that.
Yeah.
And then we're left with what we were left with. And that's what keeps therapists and coaches in business and rehabs in business, I guess, is because that's the fallout.
Yeah.
And those are the mechanisms that are now in place to help retrain people that were never trained in the first place.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and the flip side of that is even if they did put that stuff in schools, like whose version of this training would it be? And would it be more detrimental than helpful based on whoever was delivering these sort of methodologies? Like, yeah. Yeah, because there's a lot of weird opinions about things that seem helpful, but they're maybe doing more harm than good too.
Fair enough. But maybe we could
Something's
start
better
with,
than nothing.
well, we could start with science, because
Sure.
science is fact. Um, unless you're way out there. But science is proven. It's been researched, it's tested and proven. And so there's all kinds of science related to psychology and child psychology. And I'm sure that, curriculum around courses, science-based, evidence-based, that could be created that, would be impartial to people's
Yeah.
viewpoints. Um,
Yeah, you're right. And that's what gets me every time. It's the science behind it, positive psychology, all the different things. If there's a provenable and tried over and over again and the same result, I am absolutely 1000% on board with that because it's proven through science, not through opinion or other things. So I am 100% with you on that. You are right. You should develop those courses and let's get those into the schools. Yeah. Or at least get them to the parents so that they can get them to their kids because getting them into the schools, I mean, we can't even get drug education into the schools. It's amazing the kind of hoops and red tape that you have to go through to even try to get in there to educate children on drugs and alcohol. So it might be better to get these materials to parents where they can actually spend their time with their kids and teach them these things.
Very good idea.
All right, we'll get on that.
I will. I'm on it.
Awesome. Well, thank you once again for coming on our show. I know I've used another almost 90 minutes with you. Feel like we could do this once a week and have endless talks about addiction and science and neuroscience and neuroplasticity. I will say before we wrap up, I also enjoy the not reinventing yourself, but it's kind of reinventing your new identity. If you're unhappy with who you are, great, become someone else. And I don't mean that in like a fictitious I'm Superman kind of way, but like if you don't like something about yourself, recreate yourself into something that you do like and you do feel good about. And if that stops serving you, fine, recreate another new version of yourself. Like we can do this our whole lives while we fine tune what we like and don't like and feel good about or don't feel good about. It's like we're malleable. We can continue to do this stuff as on our journeys of our entire lifetimes.
Yeah. Identities are fungible. They're malleable. They can be formed, and it's just a matter of repping the thoughts, emotions, and actions that support it. And I know that all sounds a little hoo-hoo and voodoo, but it's not.
It's science.
There's all kinds of evidence around us that if we rep any other number of things, we can become better at it. So why not that?
Love that. Well, now that I know that you live pretty close to us, I'm going to have you come up to the center. Let's have you come up and have a talk with our staff and our clients, maybe do a workout and we can do a podcast in person. I mean, we are not that far apart, so this would be an easy trip up here for you.
I'm game anytime and love to come to Santa Cruz and hang out. Nothing wrong with that.
There you go. We can go take a walk in the forest, on the beach with my crazy dogs. You could do a CrossFit workout. We could do all the things.
Solid. Thanks, Angie.
Awesome. Yeah, you're welcome. And just let me know if you are planning your way up here, or let's get together and find a time that we can. We'd love to have you.
That'd be great. I'd like that. Thank you.
All right. All right. Thank you for coming on. And we'll put all this stuff in the show notes. But if our listeners want to get a hold of you and have this amazing insight to their brains and how it works and what they can do to sort of help reverse or change things, how can they get a hold of you?
Best place is my website, georgehaymaker.com, Haymaker, or LinkedIn under George Haymaker. You can find me at both places. And there's a link for a free discovery call on the website. Happy to see what's going on with you and if we are a good fit to work together.
Awesome. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing all your insights, knowledge, and depth and vulnerability. I appreciate you a lot, George.
My pleasure, Angie. It's been great. Thanks.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.